Okay, everyone. Well, thank you for purchasing a Build and Paint at Home wood kit. And I'm going to walk you through the instructions. I know the sheet was a little intimidating, but it's really not bad at all. So step one, we want to make sure that once we get our piece of wood, which side we want to use as a face. As you can see, this is a piece of wood I've already used for something else. So I'm stuck with having to do this side. But that's going to be the first step, is figuring out which side you want for the face, and then to sand. We want to feel it and make sure that there's not any rough spots. Usually where there's not holes, you'll feel that there's some inconsistencies. We want to sand that. And just do this. Super easy. It's only going to take a few seconds to get that knocked off and nice and smooth. You don't have to do the whole thing, only the face and of course your corners. Because if you're going to get a splinter, that's where it's going to come from. So we want to sand just like this. Okay. Feel it really quick. That's good enough. Now I'm going to take my brush, or you could blow on it, or use a paper towel and get all of the dust off of the board and clean my work area as well, so that I don't have any dust particles when I go to stain. My next step, step 2, is we're going to put on our nitrile gloves, which will also be included in your kit. This will just help keep the stain off of your fingers. The stain is a water-based stain, so you don't have to worry about the stinky odor, and it absorbs into the wood really quickly. Now that we have our gloves on, we're going to go ahead and open our stain, and you're going to notice, like I had mentioned before, there's not a lot of odor. It's basically just acrylic paint and water with a special ratio so that it works great with a stain. You also have a linen cloth. I just take mine and I like to fold mine in half. We just dip it in and we rub it in a circular motion onto the wood. You want to make sure that when you're staining, you don't have it just sitting and pulling on there like that. It's never going to dry, and once it does, it's going to look just like that. We want to sit there and we want to rub it in. Go in a circular motion with the grain. If you want your stain to be darker, once you do one coat, you can always go back and do another coat to get it to your liking. You'll also notice that certain grain patterns in the wood will accept the stain different. That's just working with wood. Knot holes usually don't accept stain very well. Again, that's part of the fun of working with wood, is that it's got a characteristic all of its own. So you want to stain your face, and then you want to go ahead and do your sides. And if you want to do the back, you can. Some people like to, some people don't. That's strictly up to you. But we're going to go ahead and we're just going to go ahead and put some stain down on our sides until we've gone all the way around. Once we're done with that, we're going to have to let this sit and dry probably about a good 10 to 15 minutes, and then we'll apply our stencil. Okay, so now that my stain's pretty dry, we have our stencil, which is sandwiched between what we call a masking, and some people call it a clear coat or the transfer paper. So the first thing we want to do is remove the masking, and it's always best to have 2 people, but basically we want to flip the stencil upside down so that the masking is facing up, and we want to find ourselves a corner. I want to hold my stencil. Now this part is sticky, so I don't want to touch it all over. I just want to hold a light corner, and then I want to roll the masking back nice and slow. I don't want to lift straight up. I don't want to hold this in the air. I want to keep it low. And I want to make sure that no blue ends up on this white. If it does, that means I lost part of my stencil. And if that happens, you just kind of roll this back, rub, and then start again. Just go nice and slow. Okay, very slow. And we're all clear. No blue on my transfer paper or on my masking. So now this has a nice static charge, so be very careful. We want to flip it over to the sticky side. And we're going to try and line it up. I don't want to lay it on my wood and pick it up and try and readjust, because once it grabs the wood, it's stuck. So I'm going to line it up as best I can. I'm going to just kind of like let it roll down. Once it's down, I'm going to give it a good rub. And the friction from your hand doing this is what's going to help that stencil stick to the wood. When the weather's cold and damp like this, sometimes these stencils don't like to cooperate as well as on a hot day. So we need to create the friction. Okay, so now that the stencil's down, we've been rubbing it, kind of getting some friction on there to make that stencil stick to the wood. Now we need to go to step 5, which is removing the stencil. Okay, or the transfer paper. So what I like to do, it's very hard if you have fake nails on, by the way, is to kind of keep rubbing the top until I get that clear coat to pull back. And sometimes it's easy to get an edge. Sometimes, as you can see right now, it's not so easy. So when that starts to happen, flip it, try and find another corner. There we go. Okay. And then you're going to see what's going to happen. This transfer paper is sticky. So it's really going to put some stress on your stencil. So again, we want to go nice and slow. We want to go at an angle. See how it's already kind of lifting my nut? We want to make sure that no glue is coming off on here. If so, we roll it forward, rub, and keep going. So we're going to slide this all the way nice and slow, and you're going to see it puts up a fight. And that's okay. We just want to go nice and slow. And if it's really giving you a hard time, then either your stain wasn't dry. See how that was lifting? So I come back, rock forward, and I put that back. If it's giving you a hard time, sometimes it's either the stain wasn't dry all the way, or we just didn't give it enough rubbing. Or sometimes if there's a bad spot in your wood, it'll do that. So I'm going to keep going until I get all this off. And as you can see, I have no glue on here, and that's exactly how we want it. Once that's done, you can come over here, and now you just kind of give it a rub. You want to make sure wherever your edges are that you have no bubbles. If you have bubbles in this area, not a big deal, but along where you're going to be stenciling, which is all this, we don't want any bubbles. Okay, so now that we're at step 6, as you can see here, I'm going to use these 3 colors, and as you can see, I have very little paint. A little bit of paint goes a very long way. We're going to use the sponges that were included in your kit to paint. We don't use paint brushes because the bristles can work themselves up underneath, especially when you have a rough spot like that, and your stencil will do more bleeding. So we just basically get paint on our brush, and we dab. Let me get this in an angle where you guys can see, and we just dab. We don't really do a lot of this because, as you can see, it pushes the paint off of where we want it and just scoots it around on the vinyl more than letting it sit on the wood. The only time that's a good idea is if you're doing like an ombre or you're mixing colors. So as you can see, I don't want to do that. And I'm just going to sit here and I'm going to dab all of this until I get a nice good coat on. And sometimes it requires to do 2 coats, and that's okay. Okay, so now my paint is pretty much dry. You can see there's a few glossy spots where it's a little wet, and that's okay as long as the majority of it is dry. See, I got hardly any paint on my hand. So we're going to go ahead and peel this. So find an edge. This is your step 7. Okay. Now you're going to peel up. How we've been dragging it before, now is the time that you want to peel straight up. And it's going to rip and tear just like that, and that's okay. You just want to try and get as big of pieces as you can. Okay, just like that, set it off to the side. And when you have edges like this, if you can grab them without touching anything, go ahead. Make sure you're always wiping your fingers off, because if you do get paint on them, you don't want to contaminate someplace else. After that, I'm probably not going to be able to get anything else without not getting paint someplace I don't want it. So having a sharp edge, like some people like to use X-Acto knives or toothpick, we're going to go up underneath our stencil because inside of our letters we have little pieces that we need to pick out. And always make sure you're wiping your tool. I know that I have some spots in here I'll have to go back and get, but this is a great way to just show you that, like, inside of letters, we always have to go and pick all those guys out. Okay. And we keep going until it's all done. Now, I can see through the glossiness that there's a piece right here. So all of these letters here have this, so it's just a matter of finding it. And if for some reason you do scratch like I'm doing right now, my toothpick's about to break, if you scratch your paint, that's when we go back in and do touch-ups. Not a big deal. And you can see, so that's why it's always great to make a mental note of everything that was inside your stencil, so that you can keep going. And on these words here, I'm going to go ahead and keep picking, and this will say kind is the new cool. The other thing that you have that I'm not going to get into right now, and that's the hanging hook on the back. You can just, once this has had a chance to dry, maybe the next day, flip it over, measure it out, and you just give it a couple taps with the hammer and it's in. And you're able to hang your sign. No big deal, and we are done. Thank you so much, and thanks for supporting Created by You.